This is a project about Act 46. Act 46 is a Vermont law that affects all school districts in the state. But my project is about how this law is impacting one particular district in the center of the state. My district, Washington Central Supervisory Union, or WCSU. The law, as it turns out, is a pretty big deal.
So Act 46, Vermont's education governance law, passed in 2015. People who passed it said that it was maybe one of the biggest changes that's made in education in the past 100, 150 years.
Fundamental reform of the way that Vermont has governed its public schools.
Probably the most sweeping restructuring of school governance in the state of Vermont in over 100 years.
In WCSU, there are 5 elementary schools and 1 middle high school. Each of these schools is governed by its own school board, making for a total of 6 separate school boards within the district. Act 46 is essentially designed to encourage districts to merge all those boards together into one big board that governs all the schools collectively.
It says, let's look at the way our governance is structured, and rather than having lots and lots and lots of little school boards, each one with its own district, each school is a district and each one of those has a board, let's consolidate governance. So that oftentimes along the lines of supervisory unions can think together collectively.
The goal of Act 46 in general was to encourage the small schools to come together with other small schools to create a larger entity, to have the resources and the staff and the ideas and the creativity that comes from a larger group of people to be able to offer more to the students. I think there's a lot more to it than that, and it's become very complicated.
So complicated, in fact, that after over a year and a half of exploring what consolidation could mean for WCSU, the Act 46 Study Committee is still nowhere close to a decision.
It's not just a 1 or 2 or 3-sided situation.
No, it's all gray. There's no obvious solution. If there was an obvious solution, we wouldn't be having this interview and the Act 46 committee wouldn't still be meeting. We'd have been done 12 months ago.
I met with 4 people from 3 of the towns, and I learned that all of the folks who have been grappling with this issue for so long care very deeply about our towns and our kids. They are also different people with unique sets of personal experiences, and these differences can sometimes make it hard to agree on how to move forward in light of the law's requirements.
Why is there disagreement about Act 46? First of all, you're talking about issues that people feel very, very strongly about to begin with. School education, taxes, tax increases, public finance of public education, community, local democracy. These are all things that are kind of touchstone issues. And so anytime you're going to get into a discussion about changing those things or that would affect those things one way or another, those are going to be hot button issues.
Under Act 46, there are 3 possible courses of action.
One path being the consolidation, the second path being status quo, just leave things as they are. There's a third path in Section 9 of Act 46 that is open, where you can come up with something different.
And regardless of which of the 3 approaches a district chooses to take, there are 5 specific goals that must be met.
Equity of education, quality of education, efficiency by which it's carried out, transparency and accountability in the carrying out of it, and then value to the taxpayers.
The law strongly favors Section 5B, or the preferred model approach. So if a district presents a plan that complies with this preferred structure, it is pretty much guaranteed that the district will receive the state's blessing. In other words, a preferred model consolidation plan is likely to breeze through the approval process. The state presumes that the plan will meet all the goals of Act 46, and there are also significant financial rewards for districts that comply with the preferred model. So what exactly does this preferred model look like?
Basically, it's really simple. There's 2 things. We would have 1 board and 1 budget.
what Act 46 calls the quote-unquote preferred model. In other words, it's a unified union school district, a K through 12 system that has one school board and one budget. Would that improve Washington Central's ability to meet those 5 goals? It's an incredibly complicated question. Either way that you answer that question, whether you say yes, actually we can do better if we do that, or no, we'll do worse or we can't do better. There are pros and cons on both sides that are significant.
On the pro side, there may be opportunities to improve efficiencies at the administrative level.
Right now we have the 5 elementaries, the U32 district. Each of these districts is a separate employer. And so if a teacher, like say if Calais Elementary needed a .4 teacher and another school needed a .6, we would have to go hire a teacher separately. If we happen to find a teacher who could share that job, then great, they could share the job, but that would be one person having a job at 2 different employers and trying to put their benefits and all the other things together into one job. If we were one district, we could just advertise for a full-time and make sure that the people know that it's going to be at 2 different schools.
I've come to feel that I'm in favor of consolidation of school governance. But I'm always careful to add that it's about a 55-45 decision for me. I'm not immune to the arguments that people that oppose consolidation might put forward, or when they point out things that might be lost or might be consequences of that kind of change. I recognize that. I just think that on balance, it seems to me like there are opportunities to do better under a consolidated governance model. Yeah, I may be wrong about that, and that's kind of what makes this a very challenging sort of issue to wrestle with.
Vermont schools are already doing well. In fact, they are ranked higher than schools in most other states. But there are some areas where we could make improvements, and people on all sides of the issue tend to agree about what those areas are. What is less of a consensus, however, is whether consolidated governance will lead to those solutions.
For example, of when kids transfer from the elementary schools to one class at U32, that there are measurable disparities in their mastery of certain topics or their proficiencies that they may arrive with. And then there's a tremendous amount of work and expense that goes into trying to level the playing field for everyone and bring everyone up to the same sort of common place. And it seems to me like that's something that could be addressed more efficiently and effectively if there were less boards and if the administration had more time to focus on that. So there are things like that that I feel like are some of the possible advantages.
Right now I feel like we have all the different schools have kind of been working in isolation from one another. There's not a lot of communication between the schools, the school boards. We don't know what each other is doing at all. And so then to put all these students together in one school and expect them to be in the same place, I don't think that's realistic.
There's a mechanism in place right now to fix that. We have curriculum coordinators. So it isn't like our current system can't fix it, but if this is an alarm bell to say we should be paying better attention to that, if there are ways that our school board members should be having conversations about that, by all means, that's super important. But you don't have to get rid of all the local school boards in order to do that. It strikes me.
To the person who would say that the structure that we have at present, that this is outmoded in the 21st century. For me, it's very illuminating to look at the history. In fact, one could make the case, and I shall now do so, that consolidation itself is outmoded and behind the times. The great age of school district consolidation in the United States was from about 1930 to 1970. So there's a tremendous body of experience out there in the rest of the country as to how this process has worked. And there doesn't seem to be a consensus that it's been a smashing success. From 1930 to 1970 to now, it would seem to be enough time to be able to evaluate the benefits of school district consolidation. And one might argue that it could have been a lot worse, but I don't know how one would exactly show that. From my perspective, it just justifies a certain degree of skepticism as to claims that consolidation is so much better.
Even most of the people in our district who support the idea of consolidation, even those people are not willing to swallow the preferred model whole. One of the biggest reasons for this is because the preferred model, Section 5B scenario, requires consolidation of debt along with the consolidation of governance.
The issues that have tripped us up so far that I think people should at least be aware of are debt, elementary school debt in particular. This is part of the reason why the consolidated structure just turns out to be a non-starter for us. There is such wide disparity in the elementary school debt that pooling it together creates startling inequities.
So there are some districts among the 5 that have what you might call a significant comparative amount of debt already for decisions they've taken or projects they've implemented to improve their facilities. And then there are a couple of schools, notably, that have almost no debt whatsoever.
So the problem is, if we do it the way we're expected to do it, we would consolidate all that debt, because there doesn't seem to be, right now, any way that the state has given us any clue to, any way around that. If you consolidate your debt, and that's that, and that's pretty much the word we've got.
So the debt issue seems to have created an impasse to proceeding down the preferred model route in WCSU. Unfortunately, the state does not look as kindly on any of the other options. Doing nothing opens up the possibility that the state could force the preferred model on us against our will. And the Section 9 approach, the one that allows districts to develop an alternative plan to meet the goals of Act 46, is not guaranteed to meet with state approval. Nonetheless, this something different approach has definite possibilities for our district.
A number of us within the towns, all 5 towns, have been exploring what this something different might look like in order to capture the benefits of both the consolidated model and also of the decentralized model that we have now, so as to really do better than either one would be by itself.
We're being asked to reinvent our governance structure. And you could see that as a real snooze, like, who cares? Or you could see it as, oh my gosh, this is an incredible opportunity. Let's make it the absolute best we can make it. I think we need to explode the idea that there's one model and that our job is to figure out how to meet that model. And instead to look at Act 46 as these are really important goals, and we also may have some additional goals. It seems to me that we could have one board that thinks about the collective issues, and they use the local boards as their touchstones, as their ambassadors, as their hugely important information sources. So that communication can go both ways, from local to regional thinking.
If you boil them down, just sort of equity, quality, efficiency, accountability, value, in many respects, they're more MBA type goals. They're more administrative management goals than they are education goals. And from my perspective, education goals should be built into Act 46, since what governance should do is promote education. I mean, it should be managed well, without a doubt, but the management is the means to the end, not the end itself.
Some very important goals are not so easy to track on a spreadsheet.
From a more social perspective, what is essential in institutions like public schools is to develop relationships that really between students and adults, whether those adults are teachers or paraeducators or parent volunteers, developing relationships that lead to the child actually wanting to be part of this society, of this system of which the public school is such a fundamental part. Even if it means smaller schools that may not have all the resources that a larger school might have, monetary resources, I mean. What the smaller schools might have that the larger schools don't have are human capital, social capital that can be mobilized much more effectively than money.
And to be clear, governance consolidation is not about saving money.
My sense is that there may be a sentiment in the public that Act 46 was passed to contain the cost of school education, and that it proposes a model of school governance that would do that would lead to cost savings or cost efficiency. And I just don't think there's any evidence of that at all. So I think that's one important thing for the public to know. And I think that the real question about Act 46 is whether or not it provides better opportunities for kids that are in the system. In other words, can we do more with the money that we have? It's not about, spending less, but it's about doing more with what we have.
This question is giving rise to some creative thinking about the very structure of the district, and it is opening up old conversations that have never been resolved.
Would we invite other towns or school districts in, say, for example, Twinfield or Roxbury? And there's always, the hole in the U32 donut, Montpelier, and it would be, I think, natural and just beneficial for everybody if we could find some mode of cooperation, of combination with Montpelier that will allow us to, again, to preserve what works while taking advantage of what we can all do together.
This is an issue, frankly, that Washington Central has been dancing around for years. We've commissioned studies in the past. Worcester and Middlesex, for example, did a study and had a consultant sort of take a look at, would there be a benefit from those two towns perhaps integrating more closely or sharing, the burden of costs and services and so on. There have been other studies done in the past about Montpelier and WCSU within my tenure on the board in the last 8 years. It's just a tremendously complicated issue, and without someone dangling a threat over your head, you're probably not likely to sort of spend the time and the pain of getting into that issue and exploring it. So as much as I kind of hate to admit it, the law at least has probably done at least that much good. It's forced the conversation.
These painfully difficult conversations represent local democracy in action. They are about people who feel like they have a voice, working together to self-govern in a way that makes sense for the communities in which they live.
How do you create social capital? It has to do with people working together, people who are different from each other, by the way, working together to create the bridging social capital that's so important. Over time, repeatedly over time. And it's not social, it's not like, do we have potlucks, do we socialize? That helps, certainly. But really it's about solving problems together. That's how you create those bonds and trusts. Something that's very precious to us. That's something we do well in Vermont, and that is exceptional. We do it better. People kind of take it for granted, but we shouldn't take it for granted.
I would, venture even that one of the reasons why Vermont is healthier politically, seems to have more responsible and more humane politics than one might see elsewhere in the United States, particularly at this time, is precisely because of these traditions of local self-government, both of town affairs and of school affairs. And for me, I tend to agree with those who feel that what is lost in consolidating governance at a more general level, more remote from actual involvement of people, that loss is not made up for by what is or what might be gained, and even those gains are uncertain.
What are the implications of moving to a fully consolidated governance model? What might we be giving up, perhaps inadvertently, in the process? These are critical questions to be asking, and now seems to be the critical moment in which to ask them.
Will a single board really be more efficient? Will we start to have to pay board members because it's a big job? At the last full board, the Supervisory Union board meeting, the board agenda was over 70 pages long, and this is a kind of preview of what a consolidated board would have to be looking at.
Who's going to run for that board? Who's likely to want to think about a 5-6 school budget? And it's going to be bankers and lawyers and, elite members of our society. So school boards are a very important growing place for people who are starting out in public life, and in particular for women. But Act 46, if the preferred model were implemented everywhere, we would be getting rid of about 2/3 of the school board positions in the state. 2/3 of the school board positions in the state. And not only getting rid of them, but changing what it means to be on that school board.
No matter what path our district decides to follow, a lot of the details still need to be worked out. As is true in towns across the state, WCSU is lucky to have thoughtful community members dedicating their time and energy to this process.
We're hoping to come up with the best possible option for all of the people in all of our towns. Of course, nothing is perfect, but we're hoping that it will give everyone a sense that their interests are being looked after, particularly the interests of the children.
This is what is good and special about Vermont's local democracy, that really smart and thoughtful citizens, like those we've seen here, and like you or me, can help shape the policies that affect our own communities. That we can customize an otherwise one-size-fits-all approach to meet the unique needs of unique places, and that we can disagree about it, sometimes passionately, but then continue to work together toward a common goal because we share an interest in where we live.
It just brings tears to my eyes to think of the human resources that have been put into this puzzle. I see people on all sides of this with tremendous respect.
I honestly feel like all the people that I serve with on the Act 46 committee, and indeed on the larger Washington Central SU board, are people that I respect, people that I know have the best interests of the kids in the school system at heart, and without exception, literally without exception, people that I would feel comfortable and confident in trusting my own kids' education to. I kind of feel like there's only one side in a way. There's just a disagreement about what's the best path forward.
This tone of civility is a truly precious commodity, and it seems to me that the most important question is, how can we keep having conversations that are this thoughtful and this civil? Whatever happens with Act 46, I sincerely hope that these neighbors of mine will continue to have meaningful voices in the discussion, because if these people that I know are making a difference, maybe someday I will too.